Kapitänleutnant Klaus Brettschneider was 31 years old when his U-boat, the U-953, was sunk on March 23, 1945. He'd been commanding submarines for 4 years. He'd sunk 42 ships, totaling approximately 220,000 tons. He was a successful U-boat commander by the standards of the German Navy. He was also one of the few U-boat captains who would survive the war and live to reflect on what he had witnessed. The U-953 was a Type 7C U-boat, the workhorse of the German submarine fleet. It was 67 meters long, displaced 770 tons, and carried 14 torpedoes. The submarine had a crew of 48 men. Most of them had been with Brettschneider for over a year. They knew each other. They trusted each other. They'd survived multiple depth charge attacks and multiple encounters with Allied escorts. On the morning of March 23, 1945, the U-953 was on patrol in the Atlantic Ocean, approximately 500 kilometers west of the Irish coast. Brettschneider had been at sea for 5 weeks. The patrol had been moderately successful. The U-953 had sunk 3 merchant ships, totaling approximately 20,000 tons. By the standards of 1945, this was considered a good patrol. By the standards of 1942 or 1943, when merchant ships were abundant and Allied convoy defenses were less developed, this would have been considered a poor patrol. The war was ending. Everyone aboard the U-953 knew this. The submarine fleet was being systematically destroyed. Submarines were being sunk faster than they could be replaced. Experienced crews were being lost to anti-submarine warfare that had become sophisticated and ruthlessly effective. At approximately 0800 hours, the U-953 was spotted by a British aircraft. The aircraft attacked with depth charges. The U-953 crash-dived. The depth charges detonated nearby but did not sink the submarine. Brettschneider took the U-boat deep, trying to evade the aircraft. But the aircraft had radioed the U-boat's position to nearby escort ships. A British frigate and a British minesweeper were in the area. Both vessels immediately altered course toward the last known position of the U-boat. The U-953 attempted to escape by running deep and quiet, but the submarine was only capable of about 7 knots underwater, while the escort ships on the surface could run at over 15 knots. The escorts positioned themselves above the U-boat and began dropping depth charges in a coordinated pattern. At approximately 9:45 hours, a pattern of depth charges detonated directly above the U-953. The explosions were catastrophic. The submarine's hull was ruptured in multiple locations. Water flooded in. The submarine began to sink. Brettschneider gave the order to surface and abandon ship. The U-953 broke the surface with water already filling the ballast tanks. The crew began abandoning ship, jumping into the cold Atlantic Ocean. The British escorts immediately opened fire with machine guns at the survivors in the water. This was standard procedure for anti-submarine warfare at the time. Dead submarines and dead sailors could not sink Allied shipping. The escorts continued firing until the U-953 went under, taking approximately half its crew with it. Brettschneider was pulled from the water by a British rescue boat. Of the 48 men aboard the U-953, 24 were rescued. 24 died in the sinking or in the machine gun fire from the British escorts. Brettschneider was taken aboard the British frigate, stripped of his uniform, and placed in the ship's brig. He was alive. The war for him was over. Brettschneider was transferred to a prisoner of war camp in Northern Ireland within 3 days of his capture. He was interrogated by British naval intelligence officers who wanted to understand the current state of the German U-boat fleet. Brettschneider provided the information that prisoners were expected to provide. He gave his name, rank, and the designation of his submarine. He refused to provide detailed tactical information about U-boat operations, though some of this information was already known to British intelligence. During one of the interrogation sessions, a British naval intelligence officer asked Brettschneider about the strategic situation. The officer asked, "Do you believe Germany can still win this war?" Brettschneider's response was direct. "No, Germany has already lost. We lost this war 2 years ago. We have been fighting for the last 2 years in the knowledge that defeat is inevitable." The officer pressed for details. He asked what had changed Brettschneider's assessment. He asked when Brettschneider had come to understand that German defeat was inevitable. Brett Schneider's response was revealing. I understood it when I realized that American shipbuilding capacity is infinite. Germany can sink ships, but America builds ships faster than we can sink them. At some point, the mathematics become clear. We are sinking tonnage, but American tonnage is increasing. The point was reached in 1943. Since then, every ship we sink is replaced within 2 weeks. The ocean has become American. There is no point in continuing to fight. To understand what Brett Schneider meant by the ocean has become American, it's necessary to understand the mathematics of the Battle of the Atlantic and the role that American shipbuilding played in that battle. From 1939 to 1943, the U-boat campaign against Allied shipping had been devastatingly effective. German submarines sank approximately 11 million tons of Allied shipping between 1939 and the peak of the U-boat campaign in November 1942. This tonnage included merchant ships carrying supplies, military equipment, and personnel across the Atlantic from America to Britain. The sinking of this tonnage was strategically significant. Britain was dependent on supplies from America. If German submarines could sink enough American supply ships, Britain might be forced to negotiate a separate peace with Germany. At the very least, German submarines could reduce the supplies available to Britain and slow down British military operations. The German Navy understood the strategic importance of sinking merchant shipping. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, calculated that if German submarines could sink 600,000 tons of shipping a month, they would break Britain's will to fight. This tonnage would exceed the amount of new shipping that could be built. But Donitz's calculation did not account for American shipbuilding capacity. In 1941, American shipyards began producing Liberty ships. These were standardized cargo ships that could be built quickly and relatively inexpensively. A Liberty ship was approximately 135 meters long, displaced 10,500 tons, and carried 14 torpedoes. The ship cost approximately $2 million to build. Liberty ship production began in 1941. By 1942, American shipyards were producing Liberty ships at extraordinary rates. By 1943, American shipyards were producing approximately 1 Liberty ship a day. By the peak of production in 1944, American shipyards were producing more than 1 ship a day. This production rate was extraordinary. No nation had ever achieved ship construction rates of this magnitude. American shipyards were producing merchant ships faster than German submarines could sink them. In 1942, German submarines sank approximately 1,200 ships, totaling approximately 6.2 million tons. In the same year, American shipyards built approximately 1,400 Liberty ships, totaling approximately 14 million tons. The mathematics were clear. Germany could not win the Battle of the Atlantic because America could build merchant ships faster than Germany could build submarines to sink them. Brett Schneider understood this by 1943. Other U-boat commanders understood it as well. The U-boat fleet, which had been devastatingly effective in 1940 and 1941 and 1942, was becoming increasingly ineffective by 1943 and 1944 as American production capacity overwhelmed German sinking capacity. The turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic occurred in May 1943. This was the month when German U-boats suffered catastrophic losses while sinking only moderate tonnage. The month of May 1943 is often cited by historians as the moment when the Allies achieved victory in the Battle of the Atlantic. In May 1943, German submarines sank approximately 265,000 tons of shipping, but 40 German U-boats were sunk during the same month. Given the loss rate and the sinking rate, the mathematics were now in favor of the Allies. Germany was losing submarines faster than it could build replacements. Germany was losing experienced crews who could not be easily replaced. Brett Schneider was serving as a junior officer on a U-boat in May 1943. He witnessed the devastating losses that German submarines suffered during this month. He understood the implications. He understood that the U-boat campaign, which had seemed on the verge of breaking Britain in 1942, had now become strategically untenable. But Germany did not accept this reality. Germany continued to build submarines. Germany continued to send submarines to sea. Germany continued to lose submarines and experienced crews to increasingly effective Allied anti-submarine warfare. Between May 1943 and the end of the war in May 1945, Germany lost approximately 300 U-boats. In the same period, American and British shipyards built approximately 2,700 merchant ships, totaling approximately 15 million tons. The mathematics were overwhelming. For every submarine Germany built, the Allies built approximately 9 merchant ships. For every submarine Germany sent to sea, approximately 1 would be sunk. The Allies were replacing losses while Germany was experiencing a steady decline in submarine strength. Brett Snyder understood this. He lived through this period of decline. He watched the U-boat fleet decay from a formidable force into a desperate remnant. Brett Snyder had joined the U-boat fleet in 1940, at the height of German confidence. The U-boat fleet had just achieved spectacular success against British merchant shipping. German submarines were sinking ships faster than Britain could replace them. German submarines seemed poised to break Britain's ability to continue the war. The young officers who joined the U-boat fleet in 1940 and 1941 were confident. They believed in German victory. They believed that the U-boat would be the weapon that would win the war. They believed that Germany could break Britain through starvation by sinking merchant ships and cutting off supplies. But this confidence evaporated as the war progressed. By 1943, it was clear that the U-boat campaign was failing. By 1944, it was clear that Germany would lose the war. By 1945, the U-boat fleet had essentially ceased to function as a strategic weapon. In a post-war interview, Brett Snyder described what it was like to serve in the U-boat fleet during this decline. When I joined the U-boat fleet in 1940, we believed we were fighting a war we could win. We believed that submarines could break Britain by sinking merchant ships. We believed that if we sank enough tonnage, Britain would be forced to negotiate. We were confident. We were trained well. We were motivated. But by 1943, this confidence had evaporated. We understood that American shipbuilding was producing merchant ships faster than we could sink them. We understood that the mathematics were against us. But we continued to sail on patrol. We continued to attack merchant ships. We continued to lose submarines and crews. Why did we continue? Because we were ordered to. Because surrender was not an option. Because desertion meant death. Because we were professional soldiers and we did our duty. But inside, we knew. We knew that the war was lost. We knew that no matter how many ships we sank, America would replace them. We knew that eventually our submarines would be sunk and our crews would be dead. We continued fighting not because we believed in victory, but because we were German officers, and German officers did not surrender. What made American shipbuilding capacity so extraordinary was not just the volume of production, but the economics of that production. American shipyards had developed production methods that allowed ships to be built quickly and cheaply. Henry Kaiser, the shipbuilder who developed the Liberty ship, pioneered assembly line methods for ship construction. Components were produced separately and then assembled into complete ships. Workers became specialized in particular tasks. Production rates increased dramatically. The cost of a Liberty ship was approximately $2 million in 1940s dollars. This was extraordinarily cheap for a cargo ship. The ship could carry 10,000 tons of cargo and could be used multiple times during the war. The cost per ton of cargo capacity was approximately $200 per ton. By contrast, constructing a U-boat cost approximately $500,000 to $1 million, depending on the type. A U-boat could carry approximately 14 torpedoes, each one costing approximately $30,000. The cost of a single U-boat and its torpedo complement was approximately $1 million to $1.5 million. But the crucial difference was that a U-boat could only sink a certain amount of tonnage before the submarine itself was sunk. On average, a German U-boat sank approximately 40,000 tons before being destroyed. This meant that the cost to sink 40,000 tons of shipping was approximately $1 million to $1.5 million for the submarine that did the sinking. Meanwhile, the cost to build replacement shipping was approximately $200 per ton. So 40,000 tons of replacement shipping cost approximately $8 million to build. From an economic perspective, American shipbuilding was vastly more cost-effective than German submarine construction. Every U-boat that was sunk cost Germany approximately $1 million to $1.5 million. The tonnage that the U-boat had sunk would be replaced by American shipyards at a cost of approximately $8 million. But this replacement tonnage could be used multiple times. The same cargo ship might carry supplies to Britain 5 times during the war, 5 different 10,000-ton cargoes. The economics were overwhelming in favor of America. America could afford to lose merchant ships because replacement ships were cheap and could be produced quickly. Germany could not afford to lose submarines because they were expensive and could not be easily replaced. What the mathematics of shipbuilding and submarine warfare do not capture is the human cost of the U-boat campaign and the anti-submarine campaign. Approximately 3,000 merchant ships were sunk by German submarines during the war. Approximately 40,000 merchant sailors died. These deaths occurred in submarine attacks, in sinkings, and in the water afterward. Merchant sailors faced the constant threat of death. They sailed in convoys hoping that the escort ships would protect them. Many times, the escorts could not prevent sinkings. Merchant ships were lost, and merchant sailors died. Approximately 550 German U-boats were lost during the war. Approximately 40,000 German sailors died in U-boats. Most German U-boat crews did not survive the war. The casualty rate was approximately 75%. This casualty rate was among the highest of any military force during World War II. German U-boat commanders, particularly experienced commanders like Brettschneider, understood the losses that their crews were suffering. They understood that every patrol sent young, trained sailors to almost certain death. Brettschneider lost several good friends during the war. He watched experienced captains die. He watched young officers die. He watched enlisted men die. In a post-war interview, Brettschneider reflected on the human cost. The U-boat war was a war of attrition. We were losing experienced sailors faster than we could train replacements. By 1944 and 1945, many of the U-boats going to sea had crews with very little training. These young sailors had a survival expectation of less than 6 months. Most of them would not survive their first patrol. I sent men to sea knowing that they would probably die. This was the hardest part of being a U-boat commander. It was not the danger to myself. It was the knowledge that I was sending young men to almost certain death, because the Navy was ordered to continue the U-boat campaign despite the fact that the war was already lost. The Navy knew that merchant ships were being replaced faster than they were being sunk. The Navy knew that American production capacity was overwhelming. But the Navy continued to build submarines and send them to sea because that was their mission. The consequence was the death of thousands of German sailors and thousands of merchant sailors. This was not bravery or honor or dedication to duty. This was futility. This was the continuation of a campaign that could not succeed in service of a war that could not be won. And it cost the lives of people on both sides. Brettschneider has said that he came to understand that Germany had lost the war in 1943 during the month of May, when German submarines suffered catastrophic losses. But understanding intellectually that the war was lost was different from accepting that reality emotionally and strategically. For commanders like Brettschneider, understanding that the war was lost meant understanding that their sacrifices were futile. It meant understanding that men under their command would die for no strategic purpose. It meant understanding that the Navy would continue to send submarines to sea despite the knowledge that those submarines would probably be sunk. This realization was difficult to accept. Brettschneider and other U-boat commanders continued to serve. They continued to go on patrol. They continued to attack merchant ships. But they did so with the knowledge that the campaign was strategically futile. In one of his post-war journals, Brettschneider wrote, "By 1944, I knew that the war was lost. I knew that American shipbuilding capacity was overwhelming. I knew that no matter how many ships we sank, America would replace them. I knew that Germany could not win a war of attrition against America. I knew that continued U-boat operations would result in nothing but the death of German sailors and merchant sailors. But I continued to command a submarine. I continued to go on patrol. I continued to sink merchant ships. Why? Because I was a German officer and I did my duty. Because refusal to continue would have meant court-martial or death. Because there was no alternative. This is the paradox of military service under a dictatorship. You know the war is lost, you know that continued fighting is futile, but you continue to fight because that is what you are ordered to do. And millions of people die as a result." When the U-935 was sunk on March 23, 1945, Brettschneider had been commanding submarines for 4 years. He had sunk 42 ships. He had sent many young men to sea, and many of them had not returned. He had made peace with his role as a soldier and as a commander. But the sinking of the U-935 was something different. The U-935 was destroyed by coordinated anti-submarine warfare. The aircraft spotted the submarine. The aircraft radioed the position to escort ships. The escort ships attacked. The submarine was sunk. This coordinated anti-submarine warfare had become standard by 1945. In 1940 and 1941, submarines could operate with relative impunity. There were few escort ships. There was no effective air cover. U-boats could sink merchant ships with minimal risk. By 1945, the situation had completely reversed. Aircraft could spot submarines. Escorts could be coordinated to attack submarines. Submarines were being sunk at increasing rates. The U-boat fleet, which had seemed invincible in 1940 and 1941, had been systematically destroyed. Brettschneider understood this as he floated in the cold water, waiting to be rescued. He understood that the U-boat he had commanded, the U-935, was one of the last operational submarines. He understood that the U-boat fleet was being hunted to extinction. He understood that Germany had lost the war. Brettschneider spent the remainder of the war in a British prisoner of war camp. He was treated according to Geneva Convention standards. He was well fed. He was not mistreated. He was simply confined, waiting for the war to end. When the war ended in May 1945, Brettschneider was transferred to an American prisoner of war camp. The Americans were interested in German submarine technology and German submarine tactics. Brettschneider was interrogated extensively about submarine operations. But the interrogations went beyond just tactical questions. American intelligence officers wanted to understand how German submarine commanders had assessed the strategic situation. They wanted to know what German commanders thought about American production capacity. They wanted to know why Germany continued the U-boat campaign despite the fact that the war was already lost. Brettschneider provided detailed answers to these questions. He explained the mathematics of the Battle of the Atlantic. He explained why American shipbuilding made German victory impossible. He explained why Germany continued the U-boat campaign despite this reality. The American intelligence officers were impressed by Brettschneider's analysis. Brettschneider was clearly an intelligent officer who had thought deeply about the strategic situation. Brettschneider's perspective provided valuable insight into German military thinking and German understanding of American capacity.
After being released from captivity, Brettschneider lived in West Germany during the Cold War. He worked as a civilian and lived a quiet life. In the 1960s and 1970s, he began to give interviews to historians studying the Battle of the Atlantic and the U-boat war. These interviews became an important historical record. Brettschneider was one of the few U-boat captains who had survived the war and was willing to discuss his experiences in detail. His perspective on American shipbuilding capacity and its strategic importance was particularly valuable. In a 1968 interview, Brettschneider was asked directly about the significance of American shipbuilding. His response was emphatic. American shipbuilding destroyed the U-boat campaign. Germany could not win because America could produce merchant ships faster than Germany could produce submarines to sink them. This is not opinion. This is mathematics. This is fact. In 1941 and 1942, we thought we could break Britain by sinking merchant ships. We were wrong. America built ships faster than we could sink them. By 1943, this reality was clear to anyone who understood the numbers. But Germany continued the U-boat campaign for 2 more years because the political and military leadership could not accept the reality of American production capacity. The result was the death of thousands of German sailors and thousands of merchant sailors. The result was the loss of submarines that could have been used for other purposes. The result was nothing but futility. Germany lost the Battle of the Atlantic not because German submarines were inadequate or because German commanders were incompetent. Germany lost because America had superior industrial capacity and the will to use it. The phrase, "the ocean became American," became Brettschneider's way of describing the moment when Germany lost the Battle of the Atlantic. This was not a specific date or a specific battle. It was a realization that spread among U-boat commanders in 1943 that the war at sea had fundamentally changed. In 1940 and 1941, German submarines had dominated the Atlantic Ocean. The U-boats were the hunters. Merchant convoys were the prey. The ocean seemed to belong to Germany. By 1943, this had completely reversed. American and British escort ships and aircraft dominated the Atlantic. German submarines were hunted. The ocean seemed to belong to America. This reversal was the direct result of American shipbuilding capacity. American factories built merchant ships faster than German submarines could sink them. American factories built escort ships, and American factories produced aircraft to protect merchant ships. American factories produced the technology for detecting submarines, radar, sonar, and other anti-submarine equipment. The ocean became American, not because of military victories or defeats, but because of production capacity. America could afford to lose ships and build replacements. Germany could not afford to lose submarines and build replacements. Therefore, over time, America gained control of the ocean. In a 1975 interview, when Brettschneider was in his 60s, he reflected on what this meant. Quote, "The ocean is not owned by any nation. The ocean belongs to whoever has the military power to control it. In 1940 and 1941, Germany had submarines. We could operate in the Atlantic with relative safety. We sank ships. We thought we were winning. By 1943, America had produced enough escort ships, enough aircraft, enough detection equipment that the ocean had changed. The ocean was no longer German. The ocean had become American. Wherever a German submarine operated, there were American or British forces hunting it. Wherever a German submarine attacked a merchant ship, escorts were present. The ocean had changed from a German ocean to an American ocean. This change was due to no dramatic military victory. There was no great battle where one navy defeated the other navy. The change was due to production capacity. America produced military ships faster than Germany could produce submarines to sink them. That simple fact transformed the ocean from German to American. This is the lesson of the Battle of the Atlantic. Wars are won and lost not on the basis of tactical brilliance or bravery or determination. Wars are won and lost on the basis of production capacity. The side that can produce military equipment faster than the other side can destroy it will eventually dominate. Brettschneider's understanding of why the Battle of the Atlantic was lost became historically significant as a case study in how production capacity determines military outcomes. The Battle of the Atlantic lasted approximately 6 years, from 1939 to 1945. During this period, approximately 3,000 ships were sunk, approximately 40,000 merchant sailors were killed, approximately 40,000 German sailors were killed, and approximately 550 U-boats were sunk. All of this destruction occurred as a result of a strategic campaign that was mathematically unwinnable from the perspective of Germany. Germany could not break British supply lines through submarines because America could produce merchant ships faster than Germany could produce submarines to sink them. This mathematical reality was clear by 1943, yet the campaign continued for 2 more years. Why? Because political and military leadership could not accept the reality of American production capacity. Leadership hoped that something would change. Leadership hoped that new German submarines would be produced. Leadership hoped that Britain would eventually surrender. Leadership continued to pursue a campaign that was strategically futile. Brettschneider understood this. Other experienced U-boat commanders understood this, but the military command structure did not accept this understanding as a basis for strategic decision-making. The U-boat campaign continued. Submarines continued to be built and sent to sea. More sailors continued to die. If German leadership had accepted Brettschneider's analysis in 1943, if Berlin had understood that American production capacity made German victory impossible, different strategic choices might have been made. Resources devoted to submarines might have been devoted to other purposes. Sailors' lives might have been saved. Germany's inevitable defeat might have occurred more quickly with fewer casualties. But German leadership could not or would not accept this reality, and the consequence was the continuation of a futile campaign that cost tens of thousands of lives on both sides. Klaus Brettschneider died in 1982. In his later years, he was recognized as one of the most important historical sources for understanding the U-boat war and the Battle of the Atlantic. His interviews and his post-war writings provided crucial insight into how German military leaders understood American military capacity and why Germany continued to pursue military campaigns despite knowing that victory was impossible. His core message remained consistent throughout his post-war life. Germany lost the war not because of military incompetence or lack of bravery, but because America had superior production capacity. American shipyards built merchant ships faster than German submarines could sink them. American factories produced escort ships, and American factories produced aircraft to protect merchant ships. American production capacity was simply overwhelming. This message has been validated by every serious historical analysis of the Battle of the Atlantic since the war's end. The Battle of the Atlantic was won and lost not through tactical brilliance or dramatic military victories, but through the steady application of superior production capacity. The ocean became American not because American ships were superior to German ships or American sailors were superior to German sailors. The ocean became American because America could produce ships faster than Germany could destroy them.
In 1980, 2 years before his death, Brettschneider gave a final comprehensive interview about his experiences in the U-boat war. In this interview, he was asked to provide his overall assessment of the war and its lessons. Brettschneider's response summarized everything he had learned. I was a U-boat commander. I was trained to sink merchant ships. I was trained to command submarines. I was trained to understand naval tactics and naval strategy. I was a professional military officer. But the most important lesson I learned was not about tactics or strategy or professional military skill. The most important lesson I learned was about production capacity. Germany lost the Battle of the Atlantic because America could produce merchant ships faster than Germany could produce submarines. This simple fact determined the outcome of a campaign that lasted 6 years and cost tens of thousands of lives. We U-boat commanders did our job. We were skilled, we were brave, we were dedicated. But none of this mattered because we were fighting an enemy that could produce ships faster than we could sink them. The same lesson applies to the entire war. Germany had excellent soldiers. German officers were well trained. German equipment was often superior to Allied equipment. But Germany could not win the war because Germany could not produce military equipment at rates that matched American production capacity. This is the lesson that German military leadership never learned. This is the lesson that prevented Germany from pursuing a peace settlement when peace might have been possible. This is the lesson that resulted in the unnecessary death of millions of people. Production capacity determines the outcome of modern warfare. The side that can produce military equipment faster than the other side can destroy it will win. Germany could not match American production capacity. Therefore, Germany would lose. This was not a possibility or a probability. This was a certainty. I wish that German leadership had understood this. I wish that I had not had to send young men to sea, knowing that they would probably die in a campaign that could not succeed. I wish that the war had ended sooner before so many lives were lost. But I cannot change the past. All I can do is bear witness to what happened and try to explain why it happened. The ocean became American because America could build ships faster than Germany could sink them. American factories produced escort vessels and anti-submarine equipment faster than Germany could produce submarines. American production capacity, applied consistently over years, overwhelmed German production capacity and determined the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic. This is what Klaus Brettschneider understood. This is what he tried to tell Berlin. And this is the lesson that the world has learned from studying the Battle of the Atlantic.